It's Friday, the 31st of March, and this is Politics UK. Welcome to your weekly roundup of parliamentary highlights. I'll be joined by colleagues in Edinburgh and Cardiff, and here in Westminster by our parliamentary correspondent, Susan Hume. This week,
accommodation for migrants should meet their essential living needs and nothing more. Because we cannot risk becoming a magnet for the millions of people who are displaced and seeking better economic prospects.
There's no point in blaming everyone else because they are in charge. The asylum system is broken because they broke it.
The government says migrants will be housed in former military bases to cut hotel bills.
Is there actually a blank cheque from the Treasury for you to achieve stopping the boats?
Of course not. We spend £6.5 million a day, roughly, housing asylum seekers in hotels.
The candidate selected as the Parliament's nominee for the position of First Minister is Humza Yousaf.
Scotland's new First Minister begins his tenure with a personal address.
I've lost count of how many times my identity, my loyalty to Scotland, the only country I have ever and will ever call home, has been questioned over the years.
Under his new antisocial behaviour, does he think more bullies will be brought to justice?
I can reassure the House I've never called anyone scum.
And it's the clash of the deputies at PMQs. Let's start here in Westminster with Susan Hume. So a big focus here this week, Susan, has been on asylum. Of course, Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop the boats. We now have a piece of legislation, the illegal migration bill. It's in the House of Commons. Talk us through what happened this week.
Yeah, just to recap on that bill, the idea is to stop people coming to the UK by unauthorised routes, for example, in small boats over the Channel. People who do come that way would be detained and deported to somewhere like Rwanda. And the government's aim is for this to be a deterrent, so it puts people off even attempting to come. Not all Conservatives are entirely happy with it. Some think that if you had more safe, legal routes for people to come, then they wouldn't make the journey. Others are unhappy because they think there are loopholes. They want to block off any possible appeals to the European Court of Human Rights, and they don't feel the bill does that at the moment. Labour feel that actually a bill whose attempt is to make it pointless and too unpleasant to bother coming here is actually flawed anyway. This is the point where MPs could make changes to the bill. So they haven't actually tried really to, the Conservatives haven't really tried to defeat the government at this point. At the moment, it's really about trying to persuade them to make changes. But Labour think that it's pretty much nothing you can do to make this better.
The central premise of this bill is that it will act as a deterrent by banning the right to asylum and replacing it with blanket detention and removals policies. But in order for a deterrent to be effective, it has to be credible. And this bill fails the credibility test because there is nowhere near enough capacity to detain asylum seekers in the UK. There is no returns agreement with the EU, and the Rwandan government is only agreeing to commit to take thousands at some unspecified future date. So the boats will keep on coming, the backlog will keep on growing, and the hotels will keep on filling.
We need to isolate the bogus asylum seekers who are paying the people smugglers. And you do that by making it clear that we are open to genuine cases of people fleeing danger. There is a legitimate and practical and usable route for them. And if they don't qualify for that, don't try to get in a boat because you stand no chance of having your claims upheld if you make it across.
Frankly, most of the provisions in this bill essentially dehumanise people who seek protection here, so that no matter what horrors they have endured, their individual circumstances are to be ignored, and their ability to access rights and protections set out in international treaties is to be absolutely decimated. Instead, they are to be detained, locked up, and either removed or left in a permanent limbo.
Unless we want open borders, and members opposite deny that they want this, then we have to do something about the many, many people who will still try to come once the cap has been reached. And the answer, the only logical answer, is to deny people who enter illegally the leave to stay, to detain them, and to remove them somewhere safe and free. My amendment ensures that the policy of removal can go ahead, notwithstanding any decision of the European Court. No more pyjama injunctions in the middle of the night.
One of the reasons why Winston Churchill helped set up the European Court of Human Rights was to protect citizens across Europe, including here in the UK, from overbearing governments who didn't have respect for the role of courts in keeping them honest. Is he saying that he wants, in contrast to the Prime Minister, for us to leave the European Court of Human Rights? Because this amendment, if it were passed, would mean that we would have to be in the same court as Belarus.
She mentions Winston Churchill, who of course had no intention of the UK signing up to the European Convention. It's true he sent some lawyers over there, but actually the original intention was for the UK not to, there was no need for the UK to sign up to it. We did so, and at that time there was no Rule 39 orders. There was no opportunity for judges in the middle of the night to issue these interim orders and stop UK policy, and that should not have been the case, and it should not be the case now.
This bill is dozy and it is dangerous. It is dozy because it won't work and it will be counterproductive. It is dangerous for genuine refugees, and we won't know who they are unless we seek to assess them in the first place, and dangerous for Britain's reputation.
Does he not realise that perhaps we are in this situation because the left-wing supporting lawyers who have taken us to this point where when I knock on the door of my constituent, they say, who is running this country? The government, us who voted you in, or the left-wing supporting lawyers?
We are united in our determination that this bill will be a robust bill, that it will be able to survive the kind of egregious and vexatious legal challenges that we've seen in the past, and that it will enable us to do the job and to remove illegal immigrants to safe third countries like Rwanda. I would add that the bill has been carefully drafted in collaboration with some of the finest legal minds, and we do believe that it enables us to do the job whilst complying with our international law obligations.
Right, so what happens next with this bill, Susan?
Well, the Minister, Robert Jenrick, had said several times to Conservatives who were unhappy with bits of it that he would talk to them and engage with them about it. So they've got a couple of weeks where he will be doing that. The bill comes back to the Commons after the Easter break that they're about to have. Then I think Conservatives will want to see whether he's actually come up with the goods, made changes that they're happy with, and if not, maybe then we'd see some rebellions.
OK, and this was one of the issues, along with many others, that Rishi Sunak was asked about when he was at what's called the Liaison Committee this week, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is the committee of senior MPs that he appears in front of a couple of times a year. And a lot of the focus was indeed on his migration policy. Would it work? What was it going to cost? And quite a lot about those flights to Rwanda that were paused last year. I detected a bit of irritation, actually, from some of the MPs because they felt that journalists, the press had been given a nod and a wink that those flights were about to start up, but he wouldn't confirm that to the MPs themselves.
We've got £140 million already spent with Rwanda on the deal there, £500 million that you've agreed to send to the French to build a detention centre which will be operational in a few years' time. We don't know what the figures are around using RAF Scampton and ferries, and there's no impact assessment about the current illegal migration bill that's going through Parliament, although the Refugee Council seem to be claiming that it'll cost £9 billion over 3 years. So I just wondered, is there actually a blank cheque from the Treasury for you to achieve stopping the boats?
Of course not. But what I can tell you, and the number you didn't mention, is that we're spending £3.5 billion a year currently on an asylum system. We spend £6.5 million a day, roughly, housing asylum seekers in hotels. And you know, we need to make sure that we bring that down over time. And again, as a matter of fairness and stopping people tragically losing their lives, we do need to stop the boats.
Yes, I think we're all
and
agreed.
there's no one, as I've always said, there's no one silver bullet that will solve this problem. There's lots of different things that we need to do.
It's being promised that we're going to see Rwanda departures, flights to Rwanda departing by the summer. Small boats already should be, there should be a deterrent there already in action. But actually this year we've had 3,770 people arrive in small boats since January 1st. So why do you think there's not been any evidence of a deterrent effect so far?
Just to pick up on what you said, no one has promised flights by the summer. What we've said is
well, the Home
we will get. No, that's not what she said.
Okay.
You know, what we've said is we will start flights as soon as we can after legal proceedings have completed. Now, people may speculate on when that is likely to happen or not, but it's only when that process has been completed that we can practically start the flights, and I believe it's at that moment that you will be able to see, you will start to see, what would ensue from time onwards. But it was right that we backdated the legislation, because otherwise, again, you create an incentive for people to come very quickly and search, which obviously that wouldn't be sensible either.
There are a number of newspaper reports that reflect a clear briefing that the Rwanda boats are going to flights are going to go this summer. Is there something you want to put on the record about that, or have you got nothing to add to what's been?
I think what I've said to you today, I've said publicly when I've given interviews, and I may well have said it in the House, but I'd say the same thing. We will get flights to Rwanda as soon as we can after the legal proceedings have been completed.
So we got a bit more of this on this story on Wednesday as well, the government announcing plans to house migrants on sites including former military bases. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, well, you'll have noticed in all that we've heard so far that there was a lot of concern that if you are going to detain people under the illegal migration bill, where are you going to put them? So the Immigration Minister came forward with some ideas, but as you say, not very popular with some Conservatives in particular, the idea that some of these former military bases would be used. The Minister also floated the idea that maybe ships or barges could be used, but it turned out he hadn't actually earmarked any of those yet. But at the moment, although people aren't detained, they are being put up in hotels, which of course is very expensive.
These hotels take valuable assets from communities and place pressures on local public services. Seaside towns have lost tourist trade, weddings have been cancelled, and local councils have had their resources diverted to manage them. And the hard-working British taxpayer has been left to foot the eye-watering £2.3 billion a year bill. Accommodation for migrants should meet their essential living needs and nothing more, because we cannot risk becoming a magnet for the millions of people who are displaced and seeking better economic prospects. The government will use military sites being disposed of in Essex and Lincolnshire and a separate site in East Sussex. These will be scaled up over the coming months and will collectively provide accommodation to several thousand asylum seekers through repurposed barrack blocks and porter cabins.
4 years ago, the Cabinet said they would halve channel crossings. They've gone up 20-fold since then. A year ago, they said they'd end hotel use. They've opened more than ever. They keep making new announcements, but it just keeps getting worse. Yeah. And people want to see strong border security and properly managed asylum and refugee systems so that the UK does its bit to help those fleeing persecution and conflict alongside other countries. But we have got neither of those at the moment. There's no point in blaming everyone else because they are in charge. The asylum system is broken because they broke it. They are flailing around in a panic, chasing headlines, barges, oil rigs, Rwanda flights, even wave machines, instead of doing the hard graft. They have lost control of our border security, lost control of the asylum system, lost control of their budget and lost control of themselves.
Although the Minister did not mention RAF Scampton by name, we assume that that is the base in Lincolnshire he is referring to. I can inform him that the moment this is confirmed, the local authority, West Lindsey, will issue an immediate judicial review and injunction against this thoroughly bad decision, which is not based on good governance, but the politics of trying to do something.
We should acknowledge the true genius of this announcement. Only this Home Office team could think that the answer to the problem of growing numbers of people in small boats was to take them all together and put them into one big boat. Armando Iannucci himself couldn't improve on that.
I am speaking every day, as is the Home Secretary, to our Northern European counterparts in Ireland, in Belgium, in Denmark, in France. They are all pursuing options like this because there is a European migration crisis. We have to ensure that the UK is not a magnet for those individuals who are either economic migrants or are essentially asylum shoppers. I will not allow the UK to be a soft touch.
Will the Minister agree with me that whilst the Government accelerates assessment, enforcement and removal, that it is quite right that we look at suitable and sustainable accommodation for illegal immigrants? And will he also agree with me, therefore, that if armed force bases are suitable for our brave, they are certainly suitable for illegal immigration?
Of course. We will always be motivated by decency and legality. These sites will be well run and appropriate, but we mustn't allow a further pull factor to the UK to emerge.
Thanks for now, Susan. We'll come back to you shortly. But let's go to Edinburgh now. And as we saw in the headlines, it's been a big week in Scottish politics with the new First Minister taking office. Our reporter Jenny Davidson is at Holyrood. First week in the job for Humza Yousaf. Jenny, what did you make of it?
Well, it was a big week altogether for him, and he's been the focus of the whole week here. Monday saw him become the new SNP leader after winning the SNP leadership race over Kate Forbes by 52% to 48% in the second round of voting after Ash Regan was eliminated. And then on Tuesday, he was elected as Scotland's new First Minister. Now, it's a different process here at Holyrood from Westminster. Here, MSPs have to vote for their nominee, and there can be multiple candidates. So we had the leaders of the Conservatives, Labour and the Lib Dems also putting themselves forward. But with the support of the Greens, Humza Yousaf had a comfortable majority. In his acceptance speech, he talked a lot about the support he's had from his family, who were up viewing in the gallery. He also talked about the significance of becoming Scotland's first minister from an ethnic minority background and the first person to hold that role who's a Muslim. And the opposition parties also congratulated him on that first.
The years after 9/11 were not easy for Muslims growing up in Scotland or indeed across the UK. I've lost count of how many times my identity, my loyalty to Scotland, the only country I have ever and will ever call home, has been questioned over the years. There was a time not all that long ago when I felt I simply did not belong here in Scotland. To go from there to now leading the government as Scotland's sixth First Minister, I hope sends a strong message to every single person out there who feels that they don't belong.
I want to congratulate Humza Yousaf personally on his election. I know what an honour it will be for him and how proud that will make his family watching here today. And I also want to congratulate him as the first person of an ethnic minority to become First Minister. With both the First Minister and the Prime Minister representing the UK's diverse communities, it sends a strong, positive message to everyone that there are no barriers to what you can achieve in this country. And I think that's something we can all be proud of. That's probably where the consensus is going to end, but they are genuine, heartfelt.
And regardless of our politics, we should all take immense pride that this country is to have its first minority ethnic First Minister. Whatever our political differences, and there will be many in the months ahead, today's significance cannot be understated. It is something our grandparents would never, ever have imagined when they arrived in this country, and made Scotland their home. But reaching this historic moment has not been easy, and I know that he has faced personal abuse and racism, as have so many others who don't have the platform that he and I are fortunate to have.
Yes, so Anas Sarwar making some serious points there, but he also joked that while he was congratulating Humza Yousaf on being the First Minister from an ethnic minority background, he did hope that he wouldn't be the last. But as we heard from Douglas Ross, they're probably the end of the consensus as they move on to the day-to-day politics.
Well, speaking of the day-to-day politics, Humza Yousaf didn't have to wait long for his inaugural First Minister's questions on Thursday. And the Scottish Conservatives, they wanted to ask about his new cabinet, didn't they?
Yes, they did, but Douglas Ross kind of struggling through a bit with repeated disruptions from the public gallery, and it's something we've been seeing week on week here at First Minister's questions, with the session having to be suspended to remove people from the gallery. But today it's the worst we've ever seen. I think 6 suspensions and eventually everyone being removed apart from school children. But Douglas Ross kept on doggedly picking up whenever everything was restored. And yes, he was making points, criticism particularly about some of the cabinet and ministerial roles that were announced on Wednesday, with a particular emphasis on one new ministerial role, Minister for Independence, who will be reporting directly in to Humza Yousaf as First Minister.
But as I was saying, less than 48 hours ago, Humza Yousaf stood in this chamber and promised to be the First Minister for all of Scotland. And yesterday he had an opportunity to prove that with the new ministerial team he appointed. But he failed in his first big test. This is the largest government since devolution, with more ministers than ever before. But key ministerial posts relating to social security and tourism were abolished. Yet a new Minister for Independence was created. Does the First Minister really believe that appointing a taxpayer-funded nationalist campaigner is governing for all of Scotland?
I make no apology whatsoever for having a Minister for Independence, because, my goodness, we need independence now more than ever before. We need it now. We need it now more than ever before, because in energy-rich Scotland, we have Scots that are fuel poor because of the UK government's policies. We need independence now more than ever before, because we have more food banks in this country at any other time than ever before, because of over a decade of austerity. So I would say to Douglas Ross, to the UK government, we will continue to advocate and to advance independence, because we need it now more than ever before.
Douglas Ross.
I found myself in the bizarre place that I was actually hoping there might be another intervention from the gallery just to stop that long rant from Humza Yousaf that didn't address the question at all, because I specifically asked... Here they go.
We will suspend.
And we understand that independence also came up in Humza Yousaf's first phone call with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak earlier in the week, where Humza Yousaf brought up the issue of a Section 30 order to transfer the powers for an independence referendum. But we're not expecting the Prime Minister to change his mind on that anytime soon.
And Jenny, it's not all about the Constitution. The First Minister also being asked about the SNP government's record on poverty.
That's right. Scottish Labour's Pam Duncan-Glancy bringing up some figures that were published last week on poverty and inequality in Scotland, largely showing that across various measures, poverty was staying flat rather than decreasing. And poverty is one thing that, independence aside, Humza Yousaf has mentioned as one of his key priorities. You heard him mention it in that last answer to Douglas Ross, but also in that acceptance speech after being elected as First Minister. He talked about it being a key priority, and that one of his first actions would be to have conversations with anti-poverty groups to look at what measures could be taken within devolved powers to reduce poverty.
Over 15 years, the SNP have squandered Labour's legacy. People are poorer. Relative poverty is up. Poverty amongst disabled people is up. Persistent poverty is up. The best spin the SNP could come up with...
Let's hear the member, please.
is that these terrible figures are stable. This First Minister has failed to tackle poverty in Glasgow, where he represents, and in Dundee, where he lives. He's failed to tackle poverty over 10 years as a government minister. He says tackling poverty is his priority, but he's not appointed a Minister for Social Security. So I ask the First Minister, why should people in Scotland trust him to reduce poverty?
First Minister.
Social Security is being led by the Cabinet Secretary. It's a Cabinet position. Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice. She's sitting right there. She's waving right at you. So it will be a Cabinet responsibility. And here's what we're doing. We are spending £3 billion to mitigate the harmful effects of Tory austerity. Almost £3 billion. That includes, of course, the game-changing Scottish child payment. We support families in a variety of ways, including free school meals, free bus travel for under-22s, free school meals for around 145,000 pupils. And we have made significant increases, as I've already mentioned, to our fuel insecurity, but also our food insecurity fund, as well as the Scottish Welfare Fund.
And with that, Holyrood is now closed for recess. They're taking a couple of weeks' break. So that will give Humza Yousaf and his new team some time to get up to speed in their new roles.
Thanks for that, Jenny. Jenny Davidson there at Holyrood. Well, let's return to events here at Westminster and catch up with Susan Hume. Susan, on Monday, government announced plans to tackle antisocial behaviour. We heard about plans to ban nitrous oxide, more commonly known as laughing gas. That's something the Home Secretary was speaking about in the Commons.
Yeah, I suppose this is the government trying to address a lot of those grassroots issues that really annoy and upset voters in their daily lives. So she had a whole raft of plans to stop antisocial behaviour and a bit of deterrence. So people found guilty of antisocial behaviour would pay back their debt to society while wearing high-vis jumpsuits, for example. But as you say, one of the most controversial and eye-catching ideas is making it illegal even to possess nitrous oxide. Some of the government's own drugs experts have advised against that, but as we'll hear, the Home Secretary is determined to press ahead.
Drugs are harmful to health, well-being and security. They devastate lives. That is why I have taken the decision to ban nitrous oxide. Also known as laughing gas, this is currently the third most used drugs for adults and 16 to 24-year-olds. By doing so, this government will put an end to hordes of youths loitering in and littering parks with empty canisters. Offenders will undertake manual reparative work that makes good the damage suffered by victims. Communities will be consulted on the type of work undertaken. That work should start swiftly, ideally within 48 hours of a notice from the police. And so whether it's cleaning up graffiti, picking up litter, washing the police cars whilst wearing high-vis jumpsuits or vests, those caught behaving antisocially will feel the full force of the law.
The Home Secretary says people are sick and tired of antisocial behaviour. Too right they are, because people have seen serious problems getting worse and nothing has been done. But who does she think has been in power for the last 13 years? The Tory government that has decimated neighbourhood policing. There are 10,000 fewer neighbourhood police and PCSOs on our streets today than there were 7 years ago. We support stronger powers of arrest and a ban on nitrous oxide, but look at the gaps. Nothing for antisocial behaviour victims, still excluded from the Victims Code and the draft Victims Law. Re-announcing plans on youth support that the Levelling Up Secretary announced over a year ago, I noticed one new thing in the document: an additional 500 young people will get some one-to-one support. Well, there were 1.1 million incidents of antisocial behaviour last year, so good luck with that.
On nitrous oxide, though, I wonder if I could just urge her to examine carefully the routes of supply of this particular intoxicant, because one of the issues that we need to avoid is that this substance moves from the legitimate market into the illegitimate market and becomes another hook for drug dealers to draw young people into their awful trade. How can she restrict supply to those who genuinely need it without it necessarily becoming an illicit substance that drug dealers use for their business?
We're very clear. There needs to be an exception for legitimate use. It is used in a vast array of circumstances which are lawful, which are commercial and which are for proper purposes. They will not be criminalised.
The Independent Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs recently concluded that the evidence shows that the health and social harms of nitrous oxide were not commensurate with a ban. So can I ask the Home Secretary, why has she overruled her advisers? The Misuse of Drugs Act has failed, completely failed, to prevent people from taking heroin, from cocaine and cannabis. So can the Home Secretary tell us why she believes it will stop people taking nitrous oxide?
I'm not going to take any lectures from someone from the SNP who has overseen in Scotland a total collapse in confidence when it comes to policing, and also, more devastatingly, a record high in the number of drug-related deaths in Europe.
Another parliamentary highlight this week that we saw in the headlines, Susan, PMQs. It was the deputies, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab and Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. What came up in that session?
Yeah, it was Understudies Day, and Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner picked up on those antisocial behaviour elements. Actually, to have a sly dig at Dominic Raab, who's faced bullying allegations. Now, her sly dig had got lots of people laughing, even some on the government front bench, but not Dominic Raab. He got his own back, though, by reminding her that she'd once had to apologise for talking about Tory scum. Once that was out of the way, they did talk more broadly about crime and about low levels of rape convictions, because, of course, Dominic Raab is also the Justice Secretary.
This week, the government announced their so-called antisocial behaviour policy. It's only taken 13 years. And look, I'll give him some credit. The Deputy Prime Minister knows firsthand the misery caused by thugs and their intimidating behaviour, lurking with menace, exploding in fits of rage, creating a culture of fear, and maybe even, I don't know, throwing things. So can I ask him, under his new antisocial behaviour, does he think more bullies will be brought to justice?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can reassure the House I've never called anyone scum. But if the Right Honourable Lady is serious about standing up for communities and people who suffer at the scourge of antisocial behaviour, she'd back our plan to deal more swiftly with these issues, to make sure that we ban drugs beyond the conventional ones, give police the powers they need, and if they really want to protect the public, they'll back our plans for parole reform to make sure the murderers, the terrorists, the child killers are not allowed out free to threaten other people, and reintroduce the ministerial veto that side took away.
Women feel unsafe on Britain's streets, always looking over our shoulder as we hurry to our front door. So can he tell me, under his watch as Justice Secretary, what is the charge rate for rape?
The issue of rape and serious sexual violence against women is one of our top priorities. She asked what we're doing about it. Since 2019, police referrals of cases are doubled. CPS charges have doubled. She asked on my watch what has happened. The volume of convictions in rape cases increased by 2/3.
He says that rape conviction has gone up. What he really means is that 300 women will be raped today, while he boasts about an increase of 0.5%. He hasn't answered my question, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he's too ashamed of the answer. 1.6% of rapists face being charged for their crime. 1.6%. Let that sink in.
If she looks at the latest data, the time it's taken from charge to completion of a rape case has come down by 10 weeks or 70% in the last 3 months alone. She should get her facts straight, particularly when talking about such a sensitive issue.
The way things are going, and reports are to be believed, this might be your last PMQs. So let's look at the highlights. A criminal justice on its knees, the largest court backlog on record, rape victims waiting for justice, and through it all, he managed to rack up 24 formal complaints from his own civil servants. So can he say today, will he walk before he's pushed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, one thing never changes. She always comes with the usual bluster and political opportunism. We've delivered new legislation to support the victims of crime, including rape, and to protect the public. We've delivered a plan to stamp out antisocial behaviour, and we've supported families with their energy bills. What's she done? What have the Labour front bench done? They tried to block our small boats bill, and that's the difference between them and us. We deliver for Britain. She likes to play her political games.
Thanks for that, Susan. We'll see you again towards the end of the programme. But for now, let's go to Cardiff and find out what's been happening in the Welsh Parliament. Our correspondent, Rhodri Lewis, is there. Rhodri, the First Minister was asked about plans by English water companies to use water from Wales to boost supplies. What's the background to all of this?
Well, a very interesting background, actually, David, that goes back 60 years to the drowning of the village of Capel Celyn in Gwynedd to create a lake to provide water for Liverpool. And that's still a politically charged question even today. And the whys and wherefores of how and why Wales provides water for England was raised in the Senedd by the Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price, using an example of reports that Thames Water is looking at moving millions of litres of water a day from Wales to the southeast of England.
Do you think it's right, First Minister, that a water regulator answerable to the UK Secretary of State should be making decisions on what should happen to water in Wales? Do you think that Thames Water, that loses 635 million litres a day through leakages, should be able to make up for its own failings by accessing our own water resources? And do you think it's right that Thames Water should be planning to pay just over £5 million for the use of this precious resource, when we in Wales pay among the highest water bills anywhere in the UK?
I do not myself sign up to a nationalist view of water. I don't object to English people drinking Welsh water. But what I do say is that the economic, environmental and wider benefits for Wales must be demonstrated in any relationship in which the natural resources of Wales are used to the benefit of other citizens in the United Kingdom.
Now, Mark Drayford also said that he thought that plan had now been ruled out, though he did say, he made it clear that he would expect Welsh ministers to have a role in any future proposals.
Meanwhile, Rhodri, the Welsh Conservatives wanted to ask the First Minister about the long-standing issues with a health board in the north of Wales.
Yes, the Conservative leader in the Senedd, Andrew R.T. Davies, asked about the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board, which serves 700,000 people across North Wales. Now, last month, it was put into special measures again by the Welsh Government because of continuing concerns about its operation. But Mr Davies said the former chair of the board had told the Health Minister about a wide range of problems there months before.
Notably, the concerns that were raised by himself and the board members to the Health Minister and the Director General of the NHS here in Wales back in September, where he raised long-standing concerns and issues that simply went unaddressed. His words, not mine. Why did the Welsh Government not respond to these concerns and support the board at the time?
Well, Llywydd, I don't accept at all that those things went unnoticed, because the Minister and officials were in very regular dialogue with the Betsy Cadwaladr University Health Board, including the board. The board has responsibilities. You don't discharge your responsibilities simply by telling somebody else that you've got a problem.
Now, the First Minister also said he would expect the changes that have been made to improve the service to the people of North Wales in due course.
Now, Rhodri, a big issue here at Westminster is the government's plan to get rid of laws from the European Union, but the Welsh Parliament voted against that this week. What happened there?
Well, yes, the UK Parliament is obliged to ask the Senedd to agree to the retained EU law bill, which UK ministers say will slash red tape. But the Minister for the Constitution here was emphatic in his opposition.
It is a threat to and undermines devolution. In summary, it is a recipe for legislative chaos. Whatever a person's political perspective, left, right, centre, it makes no difference. This is just a bad, ill-thought-out, authoritarian bill which discredits Parliament.
Let's not forget, we already have better rights than most people across the whole of the EU when it comes to maternity and paternity leave and pay, when it comes to a national living wage and a national minimum wage, and when it comes to the all-important issue of annual leave, which is longer here as a minimum requirement than specified in EU law.
Now, though members here voted to turn down the request to agree to the bill, that's largely symbolic because the Westminster Parliament can go ahead and pass it anyway.
OK, thank you very much, Rodri Lewis there at the Welsh Parliament. Let's return to Westminster and speak again to Susan Hume. Susan, on Monday, peers were asking about the number of children being strip-searched by police. What's the background to all of this?
Well, you'll remember the distressing case of Child Q. This was a 15-year-old who was strip-searched at school by two female Metropolitan Police officers when she was on her period and without an appropriate adult present. There was an outcry, and after that, the Children's Commissioner, Rachel de Souza, decided to look into whether this was an isolated case. Well, she reported this week that it wasn't an isolated case, that there were nearly 3,000 cases of strip searching of children in England and Wales in the 4 years up to last summer. She also found out, really quite distressingly, that one child was as young as 8 years old and that black children were 6 times more likely to be strip-searched. As you can imagine, there was some dismay about all of those facts in the House of Lords.
It is sickening, shocking and truly disturbing to read the Children's Commissioner's report on the thousands of children who have been strip-searched by the police unsupervised. Most of us thought being strip-searched was a rare occurrence during the Child Q scandal. This has proven not to be so. And worryingly, those from black and ethnic minority backgrounds appears to be disproportionately targeted. Childhood lasts a lifetime, and the mental trauma, mistrust, abuse and humiliation suffered by these children will stay with them at a huge cost to society.
For the police to strip search a child will rarely be proportionate, let alone 2,847 times since 2018. Is the noble Lady Baroness Casey of Blackstock not right when she says that the whole regime of police stop and search needs a hard reset?
Well, I would say that the noble lord is inviting me to comment on operational policing matters. I don't know whether it's appropriate or not. I would assume that they have very good reasons in order to be able to do this, otherwise they wouldn't conduct these searches.
51% of the cases, children were strip-searched in police vans and in schools and even in fast food restaurants. I think the government does have a role here to say guidelines are there to be followed.
Does the Minister agree with Baroness Casey when she said that strip searching as done by the Met was an example of, quotes, over-policing and disproportionate use of powers against certain communities, and may be due, she said, to the adultification, where black children are treated as adults and as a threat, therefore justifying greater use of force or intrusive interventions. Those were her words. Does the Minister agree with them?
I think a lot more thought needs to go into all of the various recommendations that have been made in the various reviews, many of which I happily acknowledge raise a number of very serious issues that demand urgent attention.
Thanks very much, Susan, for talking us through all of this week's parliamentary events. Well, that's all for Politics UK this week. Joe will be back in this studio after the Easter break with Politics Live here on BBC Two at 12:15 on Monday, the 17th of April. Do join us then.